Rockin' 101, Paladin checking in. Tonight is the night. You've got former lead singer of White Lion, Mike Tramp, performing at Povs in 65 Spring Lake Park. I'm going to call him right now. Let's check in on him. Let's see how he's doing.
Hello.
Hello, is this Mike Tramp?
The one and only.
Cool. Well, this is Paladin here calling from Rockin' 101. Is now a good time?
The perfect time.
So much to talk about. You've got a pretty extensive career. I'm pretty amazed. You're touring America right now. What do you think about the tour this time around?
This is just another step on the ladder of your life that were in the past. You probably looked at it in a different way. Now it's become a lifestyle where it's not necessarily so much about having a goal as it's more about living a life. I go to work every day when I'm out here. I mean, that's how I have been surviving now for 40 years. And at the same time, I'm turning it around to make sure that I also get both rewarded and gratified from performing the music that I write these days and the message that I put in my lyrics.
Excellent. One thing I like to do with folks that I interview is give them a chance to promote anything they want to promote, push, talk about, just right off the bat so it doesn't get forgotten and missed. So anything that you want to talk about right now that you're doing right now that you want people to know about, please share.
Well, I mean, right now I am on a cross-country U.S. tour where I'm taking my little show from town to town. Of course, I can't cover every place, and that's just the way it is. But these days, artists are fighting a hard battle based upon that music stores after music stores are going downhill, and there's almost no place where you can buy an album anymore. So for an artist to bring the music to the people, it's basically the way it sounds. It's me going up on stage and playing my songs and hopefully winning the audience. So after the show, when I meet and greet them on the way out and I open my little suitcase and I display my new album, they pick one up on the way, and from there on, hopefully we continue that relationship.
So it's very much get out there amongst the people, shake hands, press the flesh, and be where the people are.
Yeah, this is an addition that has been added to the show. In the past, in the glory of the 80s, where most people are familiar with me from, we pulled up to a big arena in a tour bus and we went into a big luxurious dressing room and we walked up on a gigantic stage and played for a sold-out arena, and then we went back on the bus and then we cruised to a new town, and then meanwhile kids and older people would be going to the stores in between and picking up your album, and radio would be playing the music, and those days are gone. They're gone. And now I feel much more like a painter sitting in a little store and have people coming by, and once in a while they like what I do and the paintings are for sale.
So the soul of an artist, in a way.
Well, there ain't no more compromise in anything that I do. I do 100% what I want to do. I'm not guided by a manager. I'm my own manager. I'm not guided by a record company. I am basically my own record company that just license or distribute my album out through a company. But there are nobody I ask if I should do this or if I should do that, or how's my hair, or is there enough reverb on the vocal. This is a final product coming from the artist, with only the artist being involved in this.
Excellent. It sounds like something that's rare in today's society.
You have a choice. You have a choice to even try to claw onto a bit of the past and keep some sort of faded image alive, which simply is impossible when it's something that is 25, 30 years ago. Or you can just wake up and you can be the person you are today, and you can represent what you are today. I mean, don't get me wrong, I go up on stage every night and I play a variety of songs through my career, including the big hits from the 80s, but they're just performed in quite a different way, and they're performed very sincere and honest. And I think that there is not one person in the audience at my shows that ever get the message the wrong way, that this is a man that has moved on. He is taking a little bit with him from the past, but he has molded it and he has shaped it into something that feels like it's current and belongs in today and with who I am.
To give the people that may not realize how early you started your career with the pop band Mabel as a lead singer after your youth experience back there sometime circa 1976. I was going to ask you if you could talk about that period of your life and maybe sort of how you came from there to be here today.
Well, yeah, I mean, people that would be listening to this story now would somehow maybe be looking at a 15 and a half, 17-year-old on American Idol or Voice of America, etc., etc. But in 1976 in Copenhagen, Denmark, this is growing up in a country with 6.5 million people, one national television station and nothing else, which means that the entire country is sort of glued to one thing and is kind of taking the order and the message from one side. The same thing goes with one national radio station. So being discovered and breaking through within that environment would be similar to breaking through the entire country of USA at the same time. So the entire country, good or bad, are watching you, following you, bringing you up to the top and pulling you down right after. And that all led to me wanting to basically run away from my country. At age 17 and a half, I ended up moving to Spain and having a career there for 3 years before finally running into an American that said I could live in his house in New York City and he would be my manager and my current band at that time. And in 82, we jumped on an airplane and came to New York and played the rock clubs for half a year. And this was for the beginning of the 80s, and the spirit was high in all clubs. There were a local audience in every club. So you went in there and played for like a 3/4 to a full packed house every night. And this was like the first time since I had started, 6 years prior to that I felt at home. And from that moment on, there was no turning back for me. And I even made that statement that there was no way that I would ever return to my home country. Besides going back and sort of visiting my mom at the cover of Nights, it basically took me 10 years before I returned. And by that time, I had the huge success of White Lion, and I had started a new band after White Lion. So it was coming back to a whole new generation and multiple television stations and multiple radio stations and just a whole new generation.
I see. What prompted the move to Australia? I mean, I kind of know a little bit about it, but not a whole lot.
Well, that was a family decision. This was a decision that was taken in the year 2000 based upon I was definitely at the crossroads of my life musically, and the music business that I had known were almost non-existent. I had just had my first child born. This is a decision that I made with my wife at that moment. She was from Australia, and we wanted to start fresh again. We wanted a new beginning. After a few years in Australia, you sort of get back on the horse and you record a new album. You start touring, and then you start up the whole thing again, and then one thing leads to another, you know?
Your home is still in Australia to this day, right?
No, it's not. It's not. It's not. The title of my forthcoming album in August is called Nomad, and after 40 years basically in the duty of rock and roll, it's just the way it is. It's tough for me to kind of like almost, I'm using the word recover from that. It's just a hazard from the business and the life that I have sacrificed for being in this business. And after many years in Australia, I got remarried to my current wife and moved to Indonesia. And from there on, I started working out in the world, and it led me even back to Denmark again. And I'm sort of torn between Denmark and Indonesia at the moment because my wife and children are in Indonesia. And I built a little bit of a business and share a farm with my brother where we're raising cattle in Denmark, and this is kind of the thing that sort of keeps me sane. And I've chosen that music is just something that's inside me, and once in a while it has to come out. And when I record a new album, I go out and I tour on it a little. And there's a big European tour waiting after the American tour is over. And then when I get to the end of the year, I'll see what I want to do in 2016. And I have a feeling that I probably will not want to tour that year.
Fair enough.
Let's see what happens.
Your son, I guess your eldest child, directed a video with you. What was that like?
Well, I had my oldest son, Dylan, with me last year across 55 shows in the USA. He was born in L.A., but he had never really seen the country. So I took him almost across every state of the United States, and it was just him and I for 3 months, and it was probably the best gift that I had ever gotten. He's studying graphic arts and photography and stuff like that, so he became the official photographer and filmmaker on that tour, and it was just unbelievable. Besides me playing the music, this is what this tour was about. It was him and I.
That's beautiful, man. That's really awesome.
It is beautiful. It's one of those things that is a true thing.
Pursuing truth above all else, that's important.
Now, with everything you know, of course, me looking back at 40 years of career and things like that, I have the answers to a lot of the questions that I didn't have back then. So every step I make today is all based upon what I want to do and everything.
Just to catch everybody up, a little brief rundown. White Lion obviously was a lion's share of success in your career. Fight to Survive, 1985 album. Number 8 hit Wait. Number 3 hit When the Children Cry. From the second album, double platinum selling Pride. And then you went on with Big Game, which achieved gold status. Fourth album, Main Attraction, including supporting tour. And then you disbanded in 1992. And then the story gets really interesting. I see the Freak of Nature project. and then I see the solo project, and I also see a new White Lion project. Wondering what that was like for you, moving from the success of White Lion to Freak of Nature, and then I knew there was some legal problems with New White Lion for a period of time with your fellow bandmate, if I remember right.
The whole disbanding of White Lion and the starting of Freak of Nature kind of ties in together, that I had lost kind of like the whole purpose or reason of being in a band with White Lion. At the end, there were no such thing as friendship and stuff like that, and Freak of Nature got built exactly on that this was my attempt to fall back in love with rock and roll, falling back in love with the concept of being in a band with brothers, opening the door to a rehearsal room and seeing four smiling faces that you want to spend the rest of the day with and go out and have some beers with and play some rock and roll and collaborate and do everything together, building it together. And that's exactly what that band became. And after 3 albums, when I sensed that it was falling apart at the seams, for numerous reasons, I called it quits with the band so I could keep the memories of a perfect band alive and never have one bad thing to say about that.
Beautiful.
So once Freak of Nature had its final show, I started my solo career, because by then I had been in 3 bands and I had no more soul and heart to give to a band anymore. And from 96 on, I have had a solo career with only a short interference by a bad idea of reforming a new version of White Lion, both a bit under pressure, but also in questioning and doubting myself. And that short run of that became regrettable in many ways, not just to the lead to some legal issues between Vito Bratta, my partner in songwriting and founding White Lion. It also led to just a lot of negativity. But at the same time, it almost became one of those things that I had to do it to find out that I didn't want to do it. And from that day on, could really close the door permanently, and from there on, only do what it is that I do today. And now I'm up on 11 solo albums, you know.
You've been working your butt off. It's very clear. Looks like Flemming Rasmussen, the Metallica guy, was producer, engineer on some of your records here. What was that like?
This was back home in Denmark, and Flemming was a friend of mine who owned one of the big studios in Denmark, and I ended up going in and recording one of my albums there, and Flemming was the engineer on. I've been producing all my solo albums myself in that way, and it was just one step onto the next one, and every album has its own story and its own point it's making. An important thing that I decided in 96 when I started recording the first solo album, Capricorn, was the word I with a capital I would always represent Mike Tramp in every single song, and it has ever since. My solo albums are my expression of how I see life, how I deal with life, how I deal with living in this world, and everything else. So it's not the record company is requesting an album and you fulfill a contractual obligation. No, it's something that I do whenever I have enough that I want to say. I write the songs and I go in there and I empty my soul and I put it down on a CD, and these days on a piece of vinyl, and then it's there, and then when it builds up again, I will do a new one. It is my own form of therapy and freedom of expression.
Just a question here on your Stand Your Ground album. Looks like there was a tribute to Ronnie James Dio, and I was very curious about how that came about. Did you sort of admire him, and did you become friends with him, or how did that come about?
Well, there's a long story whenever I play that song live, but the short version of it is that in 96, with my first band, we got offered to open up for a big band in Copenhagen, and we showed up, and it was Rainbow in 1976, and that night I fell in love with everything Ronnie James Dio did and followed him until he passed away. In 92, Freak of Nature got invited to tour with him across the European continent, and that's when we became friends with Ronnie and stuff like that. So it just became another thing that already emphasized how much love I had for him as a songwriter, as a singer, and no matter that I've ever tried to sound like Ronnie or anything like that, it's just he had a great importance like many other people, like Bob Dylan had, like Freddie Mercury had, like Springsteen, like Neil Young had. It's not beside that. So when I was writing songs for the Stand Your Ground album and the news came about that Ronnie had passed away, I was sitting there, and it just felt natural for me to write a true song about this man's life instead of just doing like typical Dio tribute and, you know, where you want to sound like him. So I wrote a song that really takes you through Ronnie James Dio's life from beginning to the end.
Oh, beautiful, man. You're a very soulful person, a very genuine person, and you have the courage to be transparent. I admire that.
I appreciate that. I basically woke up to this many, many years ago, and it's the only way that I could go through life and deal with all the struggle and all the changes and everything was just that I would remain the person that I was born and raised in Copenhagen, Denmark, before I started White Lion, and it became a little bit artificial for a while. I'm a man born into a very small family, never really had anything. I'm much stronger when I have both feet on the ground. I come through the front door, I leave through the front door. I try to greet every single person in the audience on the way out, and I let them know from the second I go on stage and all through the set who the person that's standing on stage is. There's no cover in anything that I do. It's the only way that I can deal with every day.
I respect that. Very genuine, very sincere. Well, everybody's really excited to see your show, Pavs on 65 Spring Lake Park, and we're looking forward to seeing your show tonight and giving them a taste of what it is to be Mike Tramp, and looking forward to that. Anything else you'd like to talk about in closing? Maybe website, social media? How do people get in touch with you? How do people find your music online and what have you?
Well, these days, social media